Eddie, you're on.
Yeah, okay, good. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Eddie Yap, your moderator for today's MAP webinar on EDSA BUSWAY, Assessment and Way Forward, which is a project of the MAP Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. Please settle down comfortably. We will now begin our program. Let me deliver the invocation. Our most merciful Lord, we come to you in our weakness. We come to you in our fear. We come to you with trust, for you alone are our hope. We place before you the disease present in our world. We turn to you in our time of need. Bring wisdom to doctors, give understanding to scientists, endow caregivers with compassion and generosity. Bring healing to those who are ill. Protect those who are most at risk. Give comfort to those who have lost a loved one. Welcome those who have died into your eternal home. Stabilize our communities. Unite us in our compassion. Remove all fear from our hearts. Fill us with confidence in your care.
Amen.
Amen.
Mga kababayan, ang
Amen.
pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Kayang magiliw, teras ng silangalan, alam ng puso, sa titik mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, kuya ka ng magiting, sa manlulupin, di ka pasisingil, sa nagatang putok sa simoy at sa langit mo'y bagaw, ay hinatang tulad, awit sa pagkayang minamahal, ang isang ng matawad mo'y tagumpay na nag-iindig, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pang ay di magdidinig, luman ang araw ng walang pagsinta, mo'y langit sa piling mo. Ang hindi kaya na pagkay mga amin, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Thank you. Today's webinar of the MAP CEO Academy is a project of the MAP Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, being chaired by yours truly. Allow me to welcome all of you to this webinar. MAP provides a forum for a balanced discussion of issues of the day and matters of public interest. This has always been the hallmark of the MAP, balanced, constructive discussion to provide our members a well-informed opinion. Today's topic is on the busway, and the title is the EDSA Busway Assessment and Way Forward. It has been 16 months since the start of this very admirable and laudable project, and it is felt that it is time for an assessment and in order to explore solutions to further improve the system for the benefit of our commuters, our people, and the economy as we open up in this environment with looser COVID restrictions. So I will now proceed to my opening remarks. But before that, some reminders. As participants for this webinar, you are automatically muted and your camera video is also switched off. As in our MAP webinar protocol, audience will remain muted. However, you are encouraged to submit your questions through the Q&A box. Kindly include the name of the panelists you want to address your questions. Due to time limitations, we may not be able to have all your questions answered live. Hence, our speakers are encouraged to please answer the questions directed to them straight in the Q&A box. Lastly, for our audience, you will only be able to see the speakers and panelists and will not be able to view the other participants. So I will now proceed to my opening remarks. Share screen. Can you see my screen now?
Yes,
Yes.
you can see it.
Okay. The objectives of this assessment is to assess the benefits of the new busway and bus service reforms and to focus on way forward to improve the system, given that this is a work in progress and this is a system that is new in our country. Okay, the Great Reset, the MAP 2021 team, efficient mass public transportation is essential for people mobility, economic growth, and reduction of air pollution and greenhouse gases. EDSA was the ground zero of Carmageddon and of great public concern. Because of that, MAP mobilized following the severe Carmageddon in August 2015. The Traffic, Transportation, and Infrastructure Committee was organized by Francisco Popoy del Rosario, MAP President, with yours truly as the chairman. So the MAP position paper was presented on August 26, 2015 at the MAP General Membership Meeting. The title was The Traffic and Transportation Problems of Metro Manila, a Holistic Approach. These are photos from that meeting wherein the position paper was presented. At the left, you can see those present was headed by President Popoy del Rosario, Board Governor Charlie Rufino, myself as the presenter, MC Gina Campos, Gerardo Daino of the DOTC Project Development Manager, Yusek Timmy Limcauco of the DOTC, Valerie Lisak, the Transport Specialist of the Asian Development Bank. This was at the August 26, 2015 General Membership Meeting of the association. Now, the advocacy included the new busway or bus expressway, in the holistic plan. So you will see the encircled busway instead of the outer lanes as before. The new busway is like an expressway exclusive for buses and emergency vehicles. They are protected with barriers along both sides against intrusion by other vehicles. Advocacy, we do not expect immediate results, and it requires persistent efforts. So on May 10, 2020, I wrote an article, Don't Waste a Crisis. And I said that the coming transition period to GCQ with subnormal passenger demand will be a more manageable environment and ought to be productively used to introduce and pilot test a new bus transportation system. Don't waste a crisis. So following that, Secretary Tugade organized a conference with his road team. And aside from me presenting busway and bus service reform, Attorney Martin Delgra III, LTFRB chairman, presented his comprehensive bus transportation reforms. Present were Secretary Tugade, the road sector team members headed by ASEC Mark Stephen Pastor, and others. After the meeting, it took all of 3 hours. Secretary Tugade said, our ideas are aligned. Status quo ante is not acceptable. Let's do it. So let me show you this unprecedented transformational holistic policies instituted by Secretary Tugade of the DOTR on June 1st. The busway at the inner lane was adopted, and hand in hand with that are complementary bus service reforms that were introduced. First, the rationalized bus route with the EDSA carousel single route, exclusively for accredited buses under IAC control. Feeder buses were no longer allowed on EDSA. So a right transfer system was instituted wherein passengers from feeder lines transferred to carousel line and vice versa. Franchises were reorganized into consortiums for the major routes, and contracted services was introduced. I have an important call, if you don't mind. Sorry, Harry. Okay. You answer. Bus service reforms complemented the ongoing rehabilitation of the MRT3. So you see, this is a holistic plan. And Secretary Tugade took action with MMDA Chair General Danny Lim providing full support. From these pictures, you can see the inspection, the meeting at the MMDA. And then this is the new bus system that was introduced from Monumento to MOA, a single carousel line, okay, for buses to circulate from the start to the end and then back again. And this is the bus transit map. So it's very heartwarming to know that we have this kind of innovation and this kind of bus transportation system that we see abroad. Now, I would like to share with you, the MAP is an organization of map management practitioners, and I would like to share how these reforms were approached And the strategies employed were accounted for the quick, inexpensive, and disruption-free implementation. Complete staff work for bus transport route and service reforms. From the outset, I knew I had personal knowledge that the staff of the DOTR was working on this one. Then best practices in bus service employed was the new carousel line, the feeder system. Inclusive process was employed wherein existing bus operators were invited to participate in the new routes. Existing resources were utilized with the rolling stock of bus operators. So this minimized the capital expenditures. MRT3 facilities were utilized, the bridges and the emergency stairs as access to the bus station platform. So I believe that this is a good management case study for management practitioners. Now here, I would say this is a master stroke, utilizing as interim access to busway platforms, the MRT3 bridges and stairs. So you can see here, these are the emergency stairs and this one. Now, I must say that these facilities are for interim use because bus commuters will have to pass through the crowded MRT3 station and the narrow track platform to go down to the emergency stairs. Okay, now it was an interagency teamwork that got the busway going in record time. And they consist of the DOTR, LTFRB, IAC for the bus management, MMDA, DPWH, and busway sections were completed in record time. The first section was completed within 2 weeks, and that is from EDSA north to Guadalupe. The second section within 6 months from Monumento to North EDSA, Guadalupe to Estrella, Makati. And this happened despite the lockdown, supply chain disruption. And when the new MMDA chairman, Benher Abalos, took over, he immediately prioritized new overpasses at U-turn slots at the north sector of EDSA to eliminate traffic conflict between buses and other vehicles. Now let me show you the how the busway worked. So you can see that commuters are benefiting from faster travel. So the busway is like a railroad, like the MRT3 beside it, unaffected by vehicular traffic. So this accounts for the efficiency of the busway. It is dedicated, it is protected against interference. Okay, so let us, I think you got the idea, so let me continue. So you saw that even emergency vehicles were using the busway. And the media took this as transformation for buses, bikes. And the single EDSA bus route was highlighted. And because of this, business groups hailed the bus system transformation on EDSA. This is the opinion of former Secretary of Department of Public Works and DOTC, Secretary Jose Ping de Jesus. He said that the busway scheme is the most practical solution ever proposed in a long time to try to put order in EDSA traffic. Knowing the background of Secretary Ping, we can say that that is expert opinion. Now, I must point out that DOTR's transformational reform policies were handicapped by the following. There was lack of budget because it was a new project and it happened midway through the year, so there was no budget appropriation. There exists a three-way authority fragmentation over EDSA between DPWH, which is in charge of the infrastructure, DOTR, responsible for public transportation, MMDA for road management. And this impinge on road space allocation for the busway. DOTR has no construction arm. So the busway is a new concept in the country, and there are many physical obstacles along EDSA. Now, I emphasized during my transportation to DOTR that perfect is the enemy of good. Perfection is the enemy of progress, said Voltaire and Churchill in 1940. Given the fact that EDSA is not designed for a busway because of the improvements that were introduced along the right-of-way. So we should not aspire for perfection because the commuters simply cannot wait for the status quo to be maintained. Now, because of the budget constraints, we resorted to donations from the private sector to build some of the access bridges with concourses. So this is a visualization of what is being now built along EDSA. The groundbreaking was on March 2021. Now, when I said authority fragmentation, there are two agencies with diverse mandates, and this presents a catch-22 situation. DOTR is responsible for public transportation and needs additional road lanes for high-capacity busway and stations to be developed. Now, currently, it is allotted 1 out of 5 lanes per direction, 2 out of 10 total lanes. MMDA, on the other hand, is responsible for private vehicle traffic management, and it needs road space for private vehicles to flow. So currently, this was before the term of the current chairman. 4 out of 5 lanes were allotted per direction, meaning 8 out of 10 total lanes. Now, so who should get priority allocation of road space? We believe that the arbiter is the National Transport Policy of NEDA, approved by the President himself in 2017. So Section 12.9 says inclusive and people-oriented mobility. Inclusive mobility and accessibility shall be achieved through the prioritization of people mobility over vehicle mobility. In line with global best practices, public transport and shared transport modes will have priority in the use of public assets, including roads of all kinds. So we believe that compliance with the National Transport Plan will resolve diverse mandates and enhance efficient, adequate, and reliable public transport. So much work is obviously needed for this work in progress busway to attain efficiency and high capacity. Okay, so this is the end of my opening remarks. I hope that this sets the tone, and we will be hearing from our esteemed speakers how to move forward to improve the system for the benefit of our commuters, our economy, and our country, including our environment. Because with efficient transportation without traffic congestion, air pollution will improve. So thank you very much. We will now proceed to the presentations. Okay, let's see. Can we have the profile of our speaker? Will you please flash the profile of okay, we have here as our first speaker, please welcome the CEO of Bellwether Advisory Services, Inc., Engineer RENE Santiago. His profile will be flashed on the screen. So it is our practice here in MAP not to repeat them. So you can read from the screen. You can see that for 35 years, he has been an independent consultant. So Engineer RENE, you have the floor.
Okay.
We cannot hear you. Are you muted,
Can you hear me now?
RENE?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
We can hear you, po.
Good afternoon. Three things make it a very unique event for me this afternoon. One, speaking with two PhD holders on the panel. Two, it happens on my birthday. Again, like a lecture I made before 500 senior CA students of Metro Manila exactly 2 years ago on the same day and on the same subject. And third, it is a rare opportunity to speak to an association representing the managerial class of the country. Hence the title of my presentation, Oh No, Not Again. Consider my presentation as akin to the boy in Andersen's parable of the emperor wears no clothes. Although the book of Jack Herer with similar title may flash in your mind. It is an inconvenient role which I performed several times in the past, involuntary, and to my financial losses. To talk about the way forward, you have to look at some of the existing deficiencies of the busway. And it can be illustrated by this. It has hit some portions, lack unit like PCGG being asked to deploy buses. But let me focus only on three concerns because of time limitations. One, it is the capacity issue vis-a-vis the road traffic. The EDSA busway, is not an island unto itself. In other words, it's part of the whole transport system. Three, sustainability and viability beyond 2022. Let me start with the first. Not all transport modes are the same. These are known to you. They have different capacity and different investment costs. And initially, you have to start with lower costs until your demand hits at a certain level. But here at this point, I'm saying already the EDSA busway as comprised, and after correction can only get more than 3,600 capacity passengers per hour per lane per direction at best. What is the evidence now on the ground about actual operations? This is from a paper of Dr. Noriel Tiglao of the National Center for Public Administration of University of the Philippines, on a paper published September 2021 and presented at the East Conference in Tokyo. The average headway northbound is 4.1 and the average headway southbound is 2.2. So you have an average of 2 minutes headway, which is equivalent to 30 buses per hour or 1,800 passengers per hour per direction if it is packed with 60 passengers. This is corroborated by my own personal dash camera. Whenever my car drives around passes EDSA, it records the situation on the busway. And I counted 9 buses over 30 minutes, which was about 3.3 minutes. The evidence from other BRT systems around the world was already a subject of paper of David Sorg of the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. And this is the chart that I would like to present to you, that the limit all over the world is about 3.5 minutes. Transjakarta, which is very similar to us, is hovering at around 2 minutes headway. There are the outliers like Seoul, which is less than 1 minute, and they're producing something like 15,000 to 20,000 passengers per hour. And their situation is completely different from what you have on EDSA. At 3.5 minutes headway, if we get to the average of the world, of the other cities, that is 1,030 passengers per hour per day. And if you change the rolling stock to articulated buses, that may bring you to 2,000 per hour. The capacity is of course constrained by the road traffic, and that is why MMDA got problematic with the busway scheme, because it is being asked to close all 13 U-turn slots on EDSA. The closing of U-turn slots, are of course incompatible with busway. But if you close all of them, you will exacerbate traffic, and this will ripple back into the busway being caught in the gridlock. This is an illustration of the situation, for example, one situation on Ortigas, which has 2 elevated left turn ramp going to west and to the east. Anytime you pass your busway there, it will run into conflict with your busway. And you cannot close that intersection, otherwise the entire traffic in Metro Manila will grind to a halt. EDSA is not an island entire of itself, and I think to that extent, Ed Yap mentioned about its relationship to the bus reform. But this one illustrates to you the effect of the road network, the development or completion of Skyway 3, and what will be the reduction of traffic on EDSA with Skyway 3 operational. As you can see, it reduces traffic on EDSA, but not only on EDSA, but it affects also R4 and R8, which are radial. This is the systems effect, and this was a simulation done by a JICA's team November 2020. The bus network is shown here, the situation before COVID, and then the situation if you fully implement the LTFRP route scheme, which is EDSA trend-centric. This was modeled by Professor Alexis Pillione of De La Salle University using ME software with grant research funding from the Department of Science and Technology. In fact, he has a better scenario that if you change the route structure, you can further reduce traffic on EDSA by utilizing other routes. And this is the root structure of the LTFRB approved restructuring. The restructuring, by the way, was already initiated way back in 2015. That we need to change or redesign the route structure. In this case, from more than 90 routes and 10,000 buses in Metro Manila, LTFRB plans to reduce that to 31 routes and 44,600 buses. That is, on EDSA, you will bring down the number of buses from 3,500 to 550 buses. The initial deployment of the EDSA busway is only 22.5 kilometers, and the final EDSA carousel is 28.1 kilometers. The EDSA carousel is to end on PITX, not on MOA. The EDSA, this is again the simulation run by the De La Salle team of Dr. Pilione, that initially when they started allowed only buses on EDSA, that is how the demand would look like. And on the right, as you add more buses into the network, it changes the demand on EDSA. Let me go to the third point, sustainability and viability beyond 2020. And let me present already ahead what I'm saying. The current setup will hit several brick walls in a post-pandemic scenario. And that is to answer, can the busway scale up to the BRT envisaged under the BBB program? Under the BBB, there is a central corridor BRT, EDSA BRT, on a study conducted by ITDP, evaluated by ADB in 2015. ADB was supposed to finance the project, but they turned cold feet. This will cost something like 38 billion pesos. That is far from what you have now, the so-called EDSA busway. How do you get the two? To fix the busway and improve it towards a BRT, you need to address 7 factors. Question, how much will it cost you? If you follow the ITDP, that is $750 million. And for what additional capacity will you get return for $750 million? Maybe 5,400? But there are insurmountable roadblocks in some of the 7 aspects. On the other hand, your other and cheaper alternative, because you already have MRT3 on EDSA, you just expand it for less than $50 million because you have 48 idle Dalian LRBs procured in 2015. If you can deploy them, you will add an additional 8,900 capacity on EDSA. As currently constituted, by using the MRT3 stations, the busway has positioned itself in direct competition of MRT3, meaning when same loading and unloading points, since you expand MRT3, there will be no more spaces for your buses passengers. And why will they go down and up when they are going to the same destination? But if you consider the other stations beyond the MRT3 line, you need to build at least 12 more stations to the north and to the south. Then, if the Mega Manila subway, which has started construction, is completed by 2026, the overall demand on C4 EDSA will decline, thus affecting the viability of the busway as well as the MRT3. The busway has so far survived on the basis of the service contracting scheme, the favorite reform proposal of Dr. Robert C. It is a lifeline to the busway. It was used to disburse ayuda to drivers under Bayanihan 1 and 2, but it became actually an ayuda more to favored operators, at least if they get paid. It offered free rides to commuters on the busway. I will say that the service contracting scheme is a bad policy akin to reverse privatization. Government becomes the transit operator for which it has no capacity. The selection of contractors will be susceptible to corruption, and it blurs the separation of regulator from operator. At the same time, if you push this continuously and expand it, it becomes a financial time bomb that the country can ill afford. Why on Metro Manila alone? It will require 169 billion pesos a year in 2021 prices, of which 18 billion will be for 5,500 or 4,600 buses. And once you have that under contract, it is too tempting for politicians not to dip their clean fingers on. As a summary of my third point, BRT is a good system, I agree. It is the most appropriate system 25 years ago when EDSA looked like this. But EDSA look like this now. So if you continuously throw money into it, it will be a fool's errand under the present condition. Let me end with by saying the good things about the EDSA bus. It has some success factors, some obvious benefits that people now say are good. The good part of the busway, like in Anderson's fable, I tried very hard to see the majestic roads of the busway so as not to be called a fool. After all, many in MAP, or mostly in MAP, have declared it a success. I've seen how beautiful its road is. And this is what I see. What many of you see, before the buses were disorderly, now they're confined to one lane, imprisoned by barriers. So if you were to conduct a survey among MAP members, the most likely answer, we love the new EDSA. It looks orderly. But there is an unintended consequences, perhaps. The LTRP's restructuring plan reduces the total bus supply in Metro Manila from 10,000 to something like 4,600. On EDSA, from 3,500 to 550. Your busway, at best, when you correct it, can only achieve less than 3,600 passengers per hour per direction. So you are in effect reducing EDSA from its erstwhile 8,000 plus capacity to less than to about 1/3. So in effect, you are incentivizing car owners. They will now have more space for EDSA, so people can consider it you have stolen EDSA from public commuters in favor of car owners. Thank you very much, and I think I have kept within the time limit.
Thank you very much, Engineer Rene. As I said, you raised very interesting points in your presentation. Now, let us hear from Dr. Robert C. Mr. Robert C. rather, well, because in MAP, we always see to it that we have a balanced discussion. So that is why we have you, Engineer Rene, and on the other hand, Mr. Robert C., who, as many knows, is the one of the staunch proponents of the BRT system and the bus service contracting services. So, Robbie, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Eddie, and good afternoon to everyone. Let me try to get on my, get on my screen. Okay. Let me see. Can you all see what I have here? Okay, I think you can see my screen share. Is that right?
Yes, we can see it.
Yes,
you.
we can
Okay,
see. We
great.
can see it.
Well, at the onset, I want to greet Rene, a very happy birthday. And it's great to be on the same panel with you. And I think every time I listen to Rene, I'm really astounded. You know, I believe we agree on more things than we disagree on. And this is one thing I would like to highlight. I think we are both public transport and mobility advocates. We really see the need to bring a high quality public transport to Philippine cities. And it goes into one key point that I want to make in a bit, which is what is a good formula for solving traffic and improving mobility. So I will be presenting, these 4 points this afternoon. What makes a bus service high quality? Why we need to raise the capacity and quality of the EDSA busway, how we should go about doing it, and possible next steps. So one thing I want to emphasize at the onset is we need more and better public transport today. And as Rene mentioned, if we don't have that, we really force people into adopting, private motor vehicles as their choice. And this is what we have seen for so many decades when we choose to prioritize motor vehicles on our roads. So the picture I have here is the newly opened BGC Ortigas Bridge, which was the hope of improving travel time between BGC and Ortigas. And very soon after, we find that on almost every day, we have a lot of congestion with cars during rush hour. And what this tells me is the durable solution to traffic congestion is to make public transport, walking and cycling, the preferred choices of everyone for their daily travel, even for car owners. And many of us at this meeting, when we go abroad into cities with good public transport, we use the public transport system. We use the buses, we use the trains, and that's what we do there. But in Metro Manila, I think we would do the same if we had more and better public transport. So one principle, I think, which Rene also mentioned, is we need to develop both rail and road public transport in a complementary and well-integrated manner. We can't have a BRT system as an island, and even our rail systems shouldn't be operating as islands, as in a way, we see today with some of our rail systems. We need to correct that so that they are well integrated. And what does this mean? Maybe I can talk a little bit about what this means also in terms of improving bus services. Let me go back one step. Let's see if I can. Just a second. I think I skipped my one slide. Let me try to go back.
Probably at the bottom left, there's a left arrow you can click.
I got it. So anyway, what I wanted to explain is what makes a high quality bus service. So Rene earlier mentioned many of the defects that we see in the current EDSA busway. But if we look at the best bus systems in the world, and especially the best BRT systems, which are also high capacity, we see a fully segregated median busway lane, which also has a spacious, what they call a passing lane, so that buses which don't stop at that station, they have a chance to pass through without stopping. You also have a clean vehicle technology, and today many new buses are electric. You have safe and universal access to stations, meaning even if you are on a wheelchair, you can get access to the station. You have what they call pre-board fare collection. So the fare is already collected when you enter the station, much in the same way as with a train station. And you have this thing called platform level boarding, meaning that when you are standing on the platform, you can simply take one step and you are inside the bus. So you don't have to climb any stairs to enter a bus. So this is what you see in many high-quality BRT systems. Plus, where you have high-quality bus services, you have private operators operating under what they call long-term and performance-based service contracts. So this is what you find in common with high-quality bus services. There is what you call a performance-based service contract, and I will be expecting Dr. Bong Montes to speak a little bit about that later. Now, in this next slide, what I have here is a video of the Guangzhou BRT system. It's one of the highest capacity BRT systems in the world, and it moves about 1 million passengers per day. And EDSA BRT would look similar to something like this. And here we are seeing a count of how many passengers are moving through in one direction per hour. And what we notice is within 1 minute, 9 buses passed through this section and moving a total of 590 passengers in 1 minute. And that translates into 35,400, let me just go back. Yeah, 35,400 passengers per hour per direction. So what does this tell us? There are high capacity BRT systems. There are also low capacity BRT systems, in the same way that some train lines can be higher capacity, some train lines could be lower capacity. It really depends on how you structure and design the system and the operations. So BRT can have as high a throughput of people as some of the light rail systems. I would agree with Sir Rene that, metro or subway systems, they can exceed the capacity of BRT systems, but the highest quality BRT are equivalent in capacity as many light rail systems. So what do we see today in the performance of the EDSA busway? And both Eddie as well as Rene already mentioned there are capacity constraints, even though we can see that the buses travel quite efficiently. Once they are moving on the dedicated lane, we see very long queues. So already in terms of travel time, Monumento to Mall of Asia can be achieved in 40 minutes or less, which is much, much better than the normal 3 hours. But the queues today are very long. And so one problem that we have is, how can we increase the capacity of both MRT3 as well as the EDSA busway? Because in my view, we need more and better. And we can have more if we expand the capacity of MRT3 and we also expand the capacity of the EDSA busway. Because one thing I believe in is the EDSA corridor will remain a very high demand corridor because of all the attractions that we see along EDSA. It's not only the business centers that are located right beside EDSA, but also the many opportunities that we see today for new developments, which are coming up all the way along EDSA. So, like Rene was mentioning, previously, EDSA carried a lot more people by bus and a lot more people by rail. You know, pre-pandemic, EDSA was carrying close to 2 million riders daily. Maybe about 1 to 1.3 million passengers in over 2,000 buses. And on MRT3, there was a time MRT3 was carrying up to 600,000 passengers. And with the upgrade of MRT3, it will be able to achieve even more than that. But we need to introduce a lot more capacity because we can expect physical classes to start. We know also MRT7 will be operational by next year. And when the economy recovers, EDSA will need to carry over 2 million passengers wanting to use public transport. Went ahead. Okay, so what we have today is an EDSA busway that was introduced, as Eddie mentioned, with very little spending. It now needs major investment to increase its capacity. And what we can observe is just adding more buses will not deliver the capacity needed because there are inherent limitations to the existing infrastructure. So one thing that I think many of us have already observed is if you can only load and unload 2 buses simultaneously at each station, this limits its capacity. And you also get bunching of the buses at the stations. So what is the secret of high capacity BRT? like high capacity rail, it also has to do with the size of your platform. How many cars can you load and unload at the same time? And one thing we need to look at is how can we develop the BRT so that you can have a much longer platform and you can load and unload many more buses simultaneously. Also, today, the bus doors are on the wrong side. And this means that people have to walk around the bus in order to get on and get off. And this adds to what they call the boarding and alighting time. So this adds to the waiting time of each bus at the bus station. In addition, the fare collection is inside the bus instead of at the station. So this is another reason why sometimes the loading and unloading of a bus is quite slow. So we also need to improve the station design so that they will be more passenger friendly, more accessible, and provide weather protection. Right now, we don't have that, and that makes it a relatively low quality experience. So this is something that we could do with investment in the infrastructure. So how do we achieve higher capacity and higher quality? We need more and higher capacity stations. We need to improve the passing lanes. We need to have BRT designed buses which have level platform boarding and can load and unload passengers both when they are using a median lane and also when it operates at the curbside. So this is one of the very important features of high capacity BRT. You're able to operate both when you have a dedicated lane, but even when you are operating at the curbside, you can still operate the bus. You also need performance-based service contracts, good accessibility, and fare collection at stations, plus longer operating hours. There was a plan for doing all this, as RENE already mentioned. There was an approved NEDA board approved project in 2016, approved under the Duterte administration. About 38 billion would have been its cost. And it was also based on very carefully prepared plans. There was a BRT feasibility study that was prepared, which included also investments in pedestrian and greenway infrastructure. ADB spent more than $1 million in grant support to prepare this particular project. So a lot of work went into this. Let me just tell you what it incorporated. So basically, what you see here in this map, everything that shows a blue line would have been a dedicated lane for buses. So about 48 kilometers, including EDSA, including parts of Ayala and Buendia, including Ortigas into BGC, including access also to NAIA. And this would have made bus travel very efficient. Second aspect would be there would be many stations, and the stations would be spaced much more frequently than what you have on the MRT. So in a way, it would complement MRT because it would allow, for example, an MRT passenger to get off, transfer to BRT, and then take a bus that could go all the way to Ayala and Buendia, that could go all the way to Ortigas Center and BGC. So both rail and bus would complement each other. And you would have about 1,500 to 1,800 buses operating, delivering a capacity of initially 1.6 million passengers, increasing to about 2.5 million riders per day, using a combination of 12-meter and 18-meter buses. I just want to explain one aspect about what was planned by the designers of EDSA BRT. And by the way, the same group that planned Guangzhou BRT, they were the same people who were involved in planning EDSA BRT. And one aspect here is it would go into what we call third generation BRT. The first generation BRT, you had only a dedicated lane and the bus service just going up and down that dedicated lane. Second generation BRT involved transferring from one BRT line to another BRT line, so that would mean moving from one bus to another bus, making a connection. But what differentiates third generation BRT is that it involved what we call direct transfer, meaning you stay on the same bus. So you can board a bus on EDSA and use that bus very efficiently while the bus is on a dedicated lane. But then the bus can move out of the dedicated lane and travel on an ordinary road or street or highway to get the passenger closer to the destination. So for example, you could have a bus line that could go all the way to Alabang or go all the way to Valenzuela using the same bus. That is a BRT bus. So this is a map that shows many different colors. Each color is a BRT route that would use the EDSA BRT dedicated bus lanes. And what we see here are 20 different routes. And as you can tell, the buses would go on the dedicated lanes while on EDSA, but they could take you much further. They could take you to Dasmariñas, Cavite, because the bus can travel even outside of a dedicated lane. So this is the concept of direct service. So from an initial ridership of 1.6 million, you could reach up to 2.5 million. And combined with MRT3, this could actually deliver a lot more capacity. Now, why is this important? Because what we can predict is that EDSA will continue to be a very high volume corridor because of the many attractions along EDSA. demand for travel will continue to grow, and we need a combination of high-capacity MRT3 and high-capacity bus. And we need to have sufficient capacity so we avoid long queues, we avoid crowding. We need to make public transport as comfortable and convenient as possible so that we can attract even car users to take public transport, as we see in Singapore, in London, in Tokyo, in New York. We want that type of facility in Metro Manila. So expanding station capacity is the key. And I just want to give an example of the design for EDSA BRT. You would have many stations that could accommodate up to 9 12-meter buses or 6 18-meter buses simultaneously. And let me give an example. So here is an example of the design for the Guadalupe station. And here we would see the application of something called a 3 sub-stop station that can handle 9 12-meter buses or 6 18-meter buses. And this is the secret of high capacity. You can accommodate as many, almost the same capacity as a high capacity train line. And this map gives you a picture of where we can make high capacity stations. So on the left column, I list here the many stations which can have the highest capacity station, as we showed for Guadalupe. So there are 15 stations here where you can accommodate a very large volume of passengers at the same time. And so here I just want to show you very quickly what some of these stations would look like. And they would look almost like a good train station that you would find in Singapore, in Tokyo, or in Seoul. This is Ayala, which would have a BRT station above ground. If you recall, MRT is underneath. So the BRT station would be constructed above the rail line in the case of the Ayala station. Here is a picture of what the Ortigas station would look like. Just a very quick slide on the economic analysis. When it was approved by NEDA Investment Coordination Committee and approved by NEDA Board, the project as presented had a very high EIRR, considerable time savings benefits. It would reduce congestion, it would reduce air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions. And why was it then abandoned? Why did the government, lose confidence? And basically, it was because some transport experts advised, number one, there won't be enough demand, especially after subway and MRT are built and improved. Number two, there was the view it wasn't going to be technically feasible because of many difficult intersections. Third, people said it's going to be impossible to move the buses from the curbside to the median. And number four, the bus operators would be unwilling to consolidate. Many good reasons for why there would be some risk to undertaking EDSA BRT. Fair enough. But today, many of those issues are already resolved. And what we see is that travel demand on EDSA far exceeds the capacity of the current busway. It far exceeds the combination of the busway and MRT3 capacity. The queues of people lining up during rush hour are more than 1 hour long. Number two, the EDSA busway is already a proof of concept. The technical feasibility of EDSA BRT has been proven. We just have to see it through. Number three, EDSA buses are already at the median. The very difficult tasks have already been accomplished. Number four, the bus operators are already consolidated into two very large consortia, and they are receptive to service contracting as the mechanism, as the new business model. We should take advantage of this if we want to make our public transport high quality. The fifth point here is most of the Metro Manila buses are due for replacement, either because of emission standards requirements, or even because of the design. Because we now know there is a good reason for having more accessible, easily accessible bus designs, buses which are what we call low entry, which can accommodate even people who are on wheelchairs or who cannot climb stairs. So, what would EDSA BRT enable? What would it deliver? It would enable buses and the bus system to be higher capacity. It would deliver accessibility for persons with disability. You can have fare collection at the station and much better weather protection. We would be able to introduce BRT buses with doors on both sides. Already, some of these exist. We could introduce even hybrid or fully electric buses which have close to zero emission and much lower operating costs. So at a time where we are facing a lot of volatility in fuel prices, moving to hybrid or electric will help the public transport industry to also manage that risk. Also, long-term service contracts would be the way to go. And this is how we introduce a better business model for our bus operators and incentivize them to deliver high quality. We would have contracts that are performance-oriented, and I think Bong will talk a little bit about that. You would enable bus operators to get long-term financing from commercial and government banks, and we can specify uniform vehicle specifications so the buses can interoperate across many different BRT systems. One last point, which is about whether it is a good or bad thing for rail and bus to overlap. And one thing I would argue is if our objective is to have the best convenience for our commuters, we need to give them the best convenience possible. And so, for high volume corridors, it makes sense to have both bus and rail operating on the same corridor. And we can see this. We have experienced this ourselves in many big cities like New York, Seoul, London, Singapore, Hong Kong. You have overlapping bus and rail on the same corridor. And why is this a good thing? Number one, you get additional capacity because you want capacity to be abundant and plentiful, because that attracts more people to use public transport. Second, for convenience to the commuter, you can transfer from rail onto the bus and get closer to your destination. So this is something which is the part of the journey of many public transport users. They combine bus and rail. And third, which is very important, is we need redundancy, because in case one mass transit service breaks down, we can still have the other service to rely on. And that redundancy is something that we lack today. So basically, in terms of next steps, we need to work on making service contracting long-term so that we can put our bus operators on a financially stable and viable basis, and helping them also to finance procurement of new BRT vehicles. Second, we need to update the EDSA BRT plans. And like Sir Rene mentioned, maybe some of those plans are already out of date. We need to incorporate the impact of, for example, the Metro Manila subway, MRT7, other factors, the new bus routes. We should include all of that in a update of the EDSA BRT plan, and NEDA should include this in the rolling infrastructure program. And then we should have a roadmap for additional busways and BRTs, because to make public transport attractive, we need to work on both rail and bus and make sure they are complementary and well integrated. So we shouldn't see bus and rail as competing. We need to work on making them fully complementary. So that should be our aspiration for the future. So thank you very much. I will stop sharing here. Turn over back to Eddie.
Thank you, Robbie. Well, true to our word, we always present to our members and to our viewers both sides of the coin. And you have heard that. So from there, we will now proceed to our next speaker, Dr. Bong Montes. His profile is on the screen, and per our practice, I will now no longer read them. But let me just say that preface his presentation by saying that we are seeing commuters returning in large numbers because of the loosening of COVID restrictions. And they are impatient to have adequate mass transport. But given the fact that investments will be needed to fully develop the busway, and that since our country is facing fiscal constraints owing to the large expenditures to address the pandemic, so we invited Dr. Bong Montes to share with us his insights whether PPP as a development mode is suitable in this particular case in lieu of GAA, meaning through the budget or through ODA. So, Dr. Bong, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Eddie. Can I just check if my audio is okay?
It's okay po.
And then you can see my slides.
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Eddie. Eddie has been my impresario. He has looked me in to give a talk on PPP versus the ODA about 2 or 3 years ago in tandem with a friend from Dedan. Now he's also looked me in on this talk. And thank you for the opportunity, Eddie. But I'm not really, obviously, I'm not a transport expert. I am, if you pardon the expression, a PMVU, what Robbie C calls a private motor vehicle user. Although I use the MRT a lot in going to the PPP Center office in Quezon Boulevard from Makati. And also RENE knows this, that I use the P2P a lot. I'm an avid user of P2P from Ayala Alabang to Makati. And then I also, if there's no car to fetch me from the ATC station, I take the jeep or the tricycle, and I also use the elevated walkway in Buendia to EDSA. But I'm very pleased to join the panel today with 2 colleagues whom I highly respect, Robbie C. and RENE SANTIAGO. I had just like what I said of me and my dear brother Butch, who's associated with the Action for Economic Reforms, and I'm with the FEF. If you listen to both RENE and Robbie, you get a balanced view of the issue. So the first, for the disclaimers, that my views do not reflect or represent any institution that I'm associated with. And I also have used some materials from, I think what Robbie referred to as the ITTB study, which actually is allowed to be shared with third parties. So you have this, we're dealing with the grand vision of the BRT and also solving the problems of EDSA with MRT. There are a lot of challenges, but just going through some of the materials available, it's a very complex system that you're trying to put in place in a country like the Philippines. And I think the main challenge for us is the bandwidth for institutions, expertise, resources, implementation, overlapping jurisdictions, which probably explains how come many of these projects have not gotten off the ground. And well, most of usually the materials you have for this transport studies are quite colorful, with a lot of architectural concept drawings and pictures. My slides will be a bit stark and white because I think I just want to focus on what thoughts or what thinking has to go through to appreciate what are the challenges that we're facing. So my outline, I will first talk about the PPP approach and also interface issues, from the institutional economics discipline, the problem of dealing with asymmetric information and contracting across firms, which are solved inside a vertical integration code. And that will be more obvious later on. Then the BRT vision, and then the creation of a busway at the median. So instead of trying to address the grand vision, and I'm not as expert as RENE in terms of calculating Headway and PPHD, etc. I had a chance to work with RENE a long time ago in the early 70s for the PPDO of the DPWH. I was doing my master's thesis. That was an input to their plan. But I just look at the busway, specifically what can be done about it. Is incremental steps. Yes, as Robbie was prompting me, make some comments on service contracting, looking at it as a payment system PPP, and then looking at the limited access busway as a resource. And Eddie was saying that I should speak after RENE and Robbie give the answers, but I will end up with questions and issues. So the access to PPP is not just a financing, but a mode of execution. And in contrast to GAA, the emphasis on outcomes and output, not on bill of materials, machinery, amounts of cement, steel, and where typically there's a lot of irregularities and issues on overpricing and overcosting. That's why there's the ABC in most of the contracts. But in the PPPs, the focus is on the outcomes and output. It's a question of identifying the risks and assigning the risk to the party in the best position to absorb and manage the risk. And the important thing is that there's a transfer of significant project risk to the private sector proponent, PSP, of which usually the two major risks are completion and cost overruns. PPP projects can be a bit more expensive, but that's because the private sector proponent has to ensure completion, has to ensure life of project efficiency, and so it will work, so that he'll end up spending higher upfront. The PSP mobilizes resources, spends, and borrows for the project. Mobilizing resources means he's not subject to CO1, and he spends. He doesn't worsen the fiscal deficit, and borrows doesn't add to the debt to GDP of the public sector. It's characterized by large projects, which means you have long project life to amortize the project. Many times the balance sheet, the size of the project exceeds the balance sheet, the sponsor. Unlike in the government, you can have the government be the sponsor of a project. It's a huge, it's like it represents the whole sovereign wealth of the country. But sponsors' balance sheets are smaller than the project, so you have to use a limited recourse purpose vehicle with a finite corporate life. The moment the BOT contract ends, the life of the special purpose vehicle also ends. You cannot use it for anything else. And any cash throw-offs cannot be diverted to any other thing, like any investment. It has to go to the project. And because it's limited recourse, the banks have to finance the lending to the project against the assets and the cash flows of the project, not to the sponsors. Maybe during the construction period, there's some recourse to the sponsor. So you have the dynamic tension between affordability, that the fares can be afforded by the consumers, commercial viability, that equity rate of return can attract investors expecting the same rate of return for the same industry, and bankability, that the project generates cash flows and debt service cover that will make the banks comfortable. But also, the banks are lending long, so they want to be sure that those cash flows are predictable, which is why, in terms of allocating risks, the risk of inflation is typically allocated to the consumer, because if you cannot predict a 25-year inflation, and the bank will not be comfortable if the PSP is exposed to that. But typically, prices go up with wages and income, which is why inflation risk is allocated to the user. I'd like to add some notes from the question from institutional economics, because as I mentioned, we seem to be, I think the main bandwidth limitation we have seems to be in terms of executing across, for example, different government agencies, different mandates, these complicated projects that we have. And under institutional economics, what you're trying to do is to economize on transactions cost. information symmetry that it's very hard to verify the information that the other party has. Bounded rationality, there are limits to analysis, and also being able to have maybe that can be relieved right now by AI that can analyze all sorts of millions of data, and it can even beat the AlphaGo game, but also incomplete contracts, so you can specify everything. But in vertically integrated firms, you economize on these transaction costs. You're able to implement with internal decision processes and governance structures that are able to overcome those transaction costs. So you can internalize planning, adapting, monitoring, coordinating, and for example, each firm will have specific assets, the management expertise, the workforce, for example, the in-house architects. All of that can be organized internally. We don't have to construct across markets. You can have internal contracts and internal contracting. For example, I saw this map of the interim system manager. Proposed interim system manager on top of the BRT or the BUSWAY. Very complicated in terms of the transactions that have to be managed and the interfaces. So for example, so you have two bus consortia, each of them having different bus operators. So that has you have some transactions there, you have some contractual relationship there. And then the GCE has to contract with the consortia for the public transport operators and for a system manager. The system manager has to do public transport planning, KPI monitoring and reporting of how the bus consortia are performing, revenue payment settlement will be there, and facility maintenance. And you have all different interfaces here, which makes a very complicated process. Now, if you are able to do all of that in a vertically integrated way, the transactions across institutions can be resolved by internal management, which is a management committee that will deliver on the outputs and the outcomes and the performance required in a PPP program. Now, going back to the BRT vision, so Robbie has you saw these charts already. So yeah, you have the central corridor that Robbie shown, and then again, I borrowed this materials from some of the materials Robbie shared. So far, 61% road-based public transport, 5.8% urban rail, and 32.6% cars and motor vehicles. Yeah, this is the chart that Robbie showed that in terms of being able to upward expandability, you have the possible BRT capacity is possible. And then picking up from the benefits of a BRT, again, focusing the outcomes and output, not on the inputs. That the proposition is that with the BRT, bus can operate at faster speeds. Same passenger demand can be met with fewer buses. Of course, with fewer buses, then you have to find out who has to give up. Passenger time savings from faster bus speeds, higher frequency resulting in shorter and more reliable waiting times for the passengers. And then you can have a more reliable passenger information systems. You can have major bus access improvements with additional quality pedestrian crossings, integrate pedestrian with bike access. And then the idea is to maybe focus on the central corridor first to address low bus speeds and bus stops and high walkway connections. So my personal views on why the bus, because the bus is flexible as opposed to the rigid infrastructure you have in rail systems. You have upward and downward scalability. You can even say if in a BRT you can convoy two buses, so you can have articulated buses that can work like a small train. It's got intermediate energy efficiency as a people mover. It's more efficient than jeepneys and cars, but not as energy efficient as urban rail transport. but so it's intermediate. Low capacity requirements, you can use existing road network, but you have to reallocate and relocate and design bus stops for safety and efficiency. And I think Robbie mentioned this, that passengers prefer not to reduce the number of transfers. And so with origin destinations not on EDSA, they would really prefer to be in the same bus to get to their destination. So the bus can be traveling over a mixed traffic part, go through the busway exclusive access, and then move on to a mixed traffic area to their final destination. And then suddenly you have a limited access busway at the EDSA median that was created last year. So I'm not talking about the grand plans for the BRT or MRT. I'm just want to talk about what we have at hand, how we need to move forward. In terms of contracting bus operators through PPP, this is PPP. This is not rocket science. It's standard. It's been done in many countries in India, where you can have PPP contracts with the bus operators, and maybe the way to do that would be contract out in terms of bus routes. I saw one material. I don't exactly know where it was, but you have identified bus routes here. So for every BRT route here, you can have bidding out the PPP contract for them on the solicited proposals basis, using service contracting as the way to for the revenue flows. But you can have express routes. You can also bid out what practically would be local routes, and the bus operators will have to bid for the PPP for each specific route, and there will be minimum performance standards and specifications for those routes. It's not rocket science. It's been done in many countries to, instead of just contracting them out as as counterparties to a service contract, you get to contract them as PPPs with the performance standards, KPIs, and proper risk sharing, and also proper monitoring of outcomes. Now, on the BRT itself, just I guess picking up from what Robbie is saying, even some of the issues that RENE raised, that you have to talk about maybe repurposed bus stops. You may have to expand platforms to handle bigger volumes. You have to build out the busway with more stops, realignments, intersections. You have to manage that. You need to manage the throughput, number of buses per day, depending on the time of day, the headway, and the convoys. One issue I have a question is that if you're trying to construct new bus stops, if you're trying to redesign new bus stops, how can you do that without interrupting the operation of the busway? You could probably do it on a staggered optimized sequencing, maybe choose some sites which are still not used as stops right now, build in those areas. You may have to adopt quick construction methods, maybe work at night, so that you don't have to interrupt the operation of the busway while you're reconstructing the expanded platforms and all that. So the repurpose the traffic intersections. These are the tasks of the interim system manager, which should be very complicated. The PT planning, KPI monitoring, reporting, revenue payment settlements, facility maintenance. And then there's also some material that says that in the eventual BRT, this should be contracted separately. Bus operations should not be the same as the one running station services. Otherwise, there'll be conflict of interest. Same with the trust fund. They should be separated out as different operations, different entities, different, proponents for each of these. Okay, just some quick notes on service contracting. The way it is explained, also how it's done in other countries. It's the government collects the fares. Then the private bus operators are paid from the fares according to the number of kilometers traveled by each bus. this delinks the revenue model from the number of passengers. Right now, it's a boundary system. So the drivers drive in a market-driven way because they maximize number of passengers. So they compete with each other for a passenger staying in that, waiting on the side of the sidewalk to be able to get him. And so that doesn't work. This is where maybe there's market failure. There's market-driven driving is not a public good. But if you get awarded, paid by the number of kilometers, you take out that incentive. But you're still also penalties and incentives. You use GPS to track vehicle, the number of routes. 5 to 7 years, long-term contracts. To me, the most difficult thing here is the government collects the fares. Will the private bus operators agree for the fares to be collected by the government? Now, we're living in a world of AI and online payment systems. We order our lunch from KFC and then we pay with GCash, and we contract out Grab delivery to pick up the lunch. And for example, Waze or Grab combines the technology of GPS, mobile telephone, online banking for them to be able to work. So it's possible to have the fares collected through an electronic banking payment and settlement solution. And even if whether the passenger pays the card to ride the bus in a station, the funds do not go to the private bus operators. There's a sweep account that goes to the government agency, whether it's BTR or whoever. And given the problem of the government is not able to keep up with the payments, which I think has been a problem recently, you can put up a fares payment reserve account, the same way that the banks require a debt service reserve account. If the borrower, the PPP proponent, borrows from the bank wants to make sure that there's enough funds in there for the next debt service payment. So in the waterfall, there's a priority of payments. Well, you pay your workers, you pay your suppliers, and before you pay any dividends, you have to put up the debt service reserve account, and it has to be maintained a certain ratio all the time. And the banks also monitor the C-funds, cash flow available for debt service. So you can have a payments reserve account, almost like the way the OPSF functioned before, although that became politicized, that will assure the private bus operators and make them willing to let the government collect the fares, and then they'll be paid accordingly in terms of the number of kilometers that they travel. Now, in terms of the
Bong?
busway, yes, please. Yeah,
Hello, Bong. Yes, how
Yes.
much time more do you need?
3 more minutes, maybe.
3 more minutes. Okay.
Yeah,
Kindly
yeah.
wind up, please. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah,
Thank you.
maybe you can think of the busway as a resource. No? It's been created as a limited busway, and private bus operators proceed at faster, benefit from the faster speeds. So this is a producer surplus. The passengers are benefiting from the quicker trips, shorter and more predictable waiting times. Consumer surplus. Consumer surplus is what you get when you take advantage of the sale in Lazada. No? You put the item in your cart, you're willing to pay a certain price, but on November 11, it's a lower price for the same amount, so that you get a consumer surplus. So for the ride that's quicker and shorter and more efficient, the passengers have a consumer surplus because they're able to pay a smaller amount than what they'll be willing to pay. But right now, they're literally free riders. No, they're benefiting from the busway without any of the externalities going to help the system become more efficient. You also need to build out the resource to further realize and maximize potentials and positive externalities. Well, from here, I'll start with a question. Can the busway be built out, operated, and managed as a solicited PPP? For example, Eddie mentioned that we're looking for some donations for some certain entities to develop stations. why donations? You can run it as a solicited PPP, and that can be funded from the operation of the PPP. In other words, you can become a BTO. Here, these are not definitive solutions. I'm throwing questions here. Maybe it's not a BTO because there won't be any transfer. It's just build and operate. Not clear whether who's the title to EDSA or who's the title to that lane. Can the BTO construct and repurpose the bus stops? Can they handle station services? Can they take care of the construction of the platforms? And can they take care of the optimal sequencing so that you can have continuous operation while you're adding new bus stations, expanding the capacity of certain platforms, etc. No? Also, in terms of the prioritization of the BRT companies, they can also enforce traffic rules. They can collect tolls from the busways. For the buses that use the busway. So this is where you're extracting the producer surplus for their higher speeds. And can they solve the issues on interface issues? It's a vertically integrated
Okay.
firm. Finally, and there's still some issues I'm not clear about. For example, can there be a stable demarcation of the busway? Because this can be a legal issue. For example, if you move the barrier a bit, maybe the BTO contract will be affected. The lawyers can have a problem with that. So in the concession period, the transition towards a full BRT, if it will be a toll operation, will it encompass the STOA PNCC? Who will be the counterpart implementing agency? So you can start contracting out the BRT PPPs, but you cannot start that because there's no BRT roadway yet. No? So you have to maybe think of converting the busway into a tollway. Busway is tollway. Make sure that you collect the fares electronically, so there's no bunching up at the entrance, and they just pass through. And then you can, in terms of prioritizing the who gets to use it, that can also be managed in terms of some sequencing, in terms of merit order dispatching. That's it. Thank you, and stay safe.
Thank you, Bong. That was quite a lengthy exposition on PPP. Now, we'll be asking you a lot of questions later, but for the meantime, let me screen share the message of DOTR ASEC Stephen Co-Pastor, who is the head of the DOTR land sector, road sector rather. Okay.
Philippines Chairman for Transportation, Mr. Eduardo Yap, MOVAS1 Coalition Convener, Dr. Robert Robbie C., distinguished speakers and guests, ladies and gentlemen, fellow workers in government, magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat mula sa kagawaran ng transportasyon. On behalf of DOTR Secretary Art Tugade, I would like to thank the Management Association of the Philippines for leading this webinar to discuss the EDSA Busway project, particularly its ongoing implementation and ways on how to further improve its operations. Following the implementation of the Public Utility Vehicle Service Contracting Program, Phase 2, which started last September 13, wherein we are utilizing the General Appropriations Act of the Department of Transportation amounting to 3 billion pesos, we have seen a considerable rise in the number of authorized persons outside residence as well as healthcare workers who have benefited in the free ride program, not only in the EDSA busway, but even all across the country. Per the latest report from the LTFRB, the payouts of the service contracting program has reached 4.7 billion, with the ridership increasing to 53.2 million nationwide from March 30 to October 24, 2021. Aside from this, the department has also been addressing the concerns of our PUV operators and drivers on the fare hike And I'd like to give emphasis yesterday as we welcome the release of the 1 billion pesos to the LTFRB from the Development Budget Coordination Committee or DBCC as fuel subsidies as mandated under the train law in support of the transportation sector amid the increasing prices of fuel and oil products. Through this, qualified public utility vehicle drivers will receive the cash grants using the system already established under the Pantawid Pasada program of the Department of Transportation through the implementing agency LTFRB, wherein the Land Bank of the Philippines shall disburse money straight to the cash cards issued to drivers and operators. The release of the fuel subsidies is also timely, as the Department of Transportation this coming Thursday will also be defending its proposal before the Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging and Infectious Diseases, or IATF, to approve a significant increase in the passenger capacity of public transportation as the National Capital Region and all other parts of the country are placed under more relaxed quarantine levels. On another note, as of October 2021, the EDSA busway has 531 units with special permits, with an average of 386 units running, accumulating 203,770 passengers daily. To date, there are 13 stations that are operational at the median lane and 2 temporary curbside stations. For 2022, the DOTR road sector has requested a total amount of 472 million for the retrofitting of existing stations, installation of lifts, construction of footbridges, creation of other bus stops, and the creation of a project management office for the EDSA busway. On behalf of Secretary Tugade, we would like to express our gratitude and appreciation to the MAP for spearheading this activity. And may this webinar yield productive results for our unified goal of improving the public transport operations, particularly the EDSA busway system. I'd like to give emphasis that the EDSA busway system, although not perfect at this point, is a much great improvement as compared to what it is before in EDSA. Thank you and good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you very much, ASEC Steve Pastor. I know that you're so busy. All of you have your hands full, and yet you were able to make time to share with us this update. We appreciate very much the information that you gave us, and we'll take note of them. So if you may stay sign on if you wish, or you may sign off. I know that you're quite busy. So again, thank you very much. We will now proceed to the Q&A panel. So may we share the screen of there we have Mr. Rex C. Drilon, who is a member of this committee. He is the Vice Chair, Center for Excellence in Governance, former USEC Glisser Sikat. He's also a MAP member of this committee, former Undersecretary of the DOTR, Consultant, Inter-Pacific Capital Corp, Mr. George Yulo, also member of this committee, President and CEO of One Document Corporation. So, okay, take it away.
Eddie, Mr. Chairman, I may ask the first question. Well, it's just really a question because we're out of time. It's normally
Yeah.
EP meetings
Right.
end at 2:30. So, and rather than another question, listening to the three speakers, I realized that the issue that we thought was simple a few days ago when we had our pre-webinar meeting among the four of us is really much deeper and more complicated than it is. We apparently have several problems in addressing the issue of the EDSA busway. There's loss of interest or loss of momentum, and there's varying degrees of ignorance or enlightenment among the government authorities who are looking at this problem. And even among the experts, this disagreement from RENE's estimate of a $750 million solution to a $50 million solution. And the answer is clear. But Robbie C. also mentioned that there were some experts who were able to throw a monkey wrench on the project using obsolete arguments that now have to be reviewed. And in the previous administration, there were corruption issues that came into being. I don't know if it's still going on up to now, but corruption has always been a problem. And then, as June Palafox would say, there's a supply side to this and a demand side to mobility and transportation. So can we please have those sides also considered? And finally, the coming elections, no matter what we do now, by June 2022, we will have a new DOTR secretary, new DOTR USEX and ASEX, a new MMDA general manager, and so on and so forth. And even maybe some of the local mayors will be changed. So you have all of these problems. You're trying to come up with a solution for MAP to do something. And my suggestion, Mr. Chairman, if I may, is that why don't we have a working session for a very small group of people? And I'd like to suggest, if I may, Robbie C., we have RENE Santiago. It's always good to have several perspectives in an opinion. Then let's bring in June Palafox, because he was there from the very start, from the Metro Plan all the way to even issues today regarding transport. And let's bring in a DOTR, at the very least, a USEC, and the MMDA new general manager, and of course, our very own EDSA. And then have a working session and come up with at least a 2 or 3 pager position that we can release to the business sector, because this affects all of us. So rather than as a question, I wanted to make that suggestion. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Rex. Good suggestion. Can we now go to Gleaser?
Well, there is a comment from one of the anonymous participants, audience, I mean, is that as long as there are people waiting for 1 hour, something is wrong with the BRT, which is logical, no? So what can we do to remove that? We have to increase the number of buses, increase the number of BRT cars, etc., etc. Anybody wants to answer that, please?
Robbie, would you like to answer that?
Robbie?
Maybe I can just say that there were some, I think, financial issues related to the shortage of buses. I mean, that's one factor. Of course, even with all the buses available, I think we would still have quite a lengthy queue. But it became excessive because, as I understand, the payments to operators were delayed for many weeks. And it's
Robbie,
difficult for...
Robbie,
yes.
That has been resolved.
Yes.
That has been resolved, yes.
Yes. So I'm hoping, you see, for me, a real test is whether from the time of claim to the time of payment, if they can reduce it to 1 week. You see, that would be ideal, because then we don't put so much burden on the operators to self-finance, you know, the operations. And I would even suggest, Eddie, with your, in a way, convening role, that could be one of the things where MAP, with its expertise in systems, working together with DOTR and the bus operators, can try to bring the turnaround time for processing of claims down to 1 week. It would be a great benefit to everyone. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Robbie. Now let's hear from Rene. Rene, what is your
Your
opinion
question
regarding that?
is, there is no shortage of buses. Even if you build only 500 buses on EDSA, they cannot fit into your busway. My calculation shows that all you need on the busway is 100 buses. More than that, they will just hit each other from the rear. And that is what I keep on saying, the limitations of the current configuration. You simply
Rene,
cannot get beyond that.
Rene, what is the solution to that?
You're asking me for a free advice. You know,
Yes.
Bong will tell you that if it is free, it's considered worthless. And the
Robbie
OTR has
showed
always
us.
treated
Robbie
my
showed us a
advice as
video.
worthless.
Gratuitous
Robbie
device,
showed
advice.
Robbie showed us a video earlier of the Guangzhou BRT, and
That's why my
it
that's why
has
in my
a single
presentation,
lane. It has a single lane between stations, and yet it was able to generate a throughput of 30,000 uh, 35,000 passengers per hour, as you said. So,
that is not on the
Robbie,
record.
is
The
is
highest
this
I got was
just
15.
is this just a matter of scaling up the
No,
capacity?
you do your calculation. Do your calculation if you can run as many buses and increase the headway. The headway before the pandemic was hitting something like 8 seconds every minute. You know, every 8 seconds there was a bus we counted on Guadalupe. That's an actual survey. That was an equivalent of 8,000 passengers per hour per day capacity. You brought it down to less than 1,000. So the answer is not building more. You have to build more buses if you can get more headway.
Robbie, what is your response to that?
Well, for me, there were many issues with having the buses on the curbside. I think Rene will also accept that it was a very low quality bus service at the curbside because the travel times were quite long and the travel speeds were quite slow. I believe with a dedicated lane at the median and with the proper design, you can achieve much higher throughput and more buses operating efficiently.
My
And
argument,
yes,
Robbie, is you can get there if you pour a lot of money, but you cannot get there because of the configuration of EDSA right now. You can get there if you did it in 1995 when the MRT was not there and several of the flyovers are not there. The moment you try to force that higher capacity, you will have to shut down the Ortigas left turn flyover, the EDSA, and the Bindia flyover left turn.
I think that's subject to dispute, Rene, because
Okay, I'm
the
stating it
yes,
as a
yes.
transport
I
engineer and
think
I'm putting my line.
I
I've
think we
stated it
can
again before in Cebu
yeah.
BRT in 2013. The World Bank talked to me. They said my concerns were valid, but up to now, 8 years have gone by. The Cebu BRT is nowhere in sight.
Can I interject something, Eddie?
Okay, George.
Yeah. First of all, we can talk about very detailed operational issues right now, but I think it's important to congratulate our chairman for inviting a very good mix of speaker right now. As Rex said, it opened up a lot of our eyes, and there's so much detailed information that's available. Now, foremost of this is the challenge of overlapping jurisdiction, which even financing will have a difficulty resolving. So, I think my first question to you, Rene, what do you think is the way to resolve this overlapping jurisdiction? Because I've been espousing, I said, look, can we identify who's really in charge? DPWH, DOTR, MMDA. That's one. Number two, I like both your presentation because you know one Rene, your data is really a platform for a more macro planning, and I am glad to hear from Robbie. Robbie, I really like your detailed presentation because same thing that Eddie and I have been discussing since 2015, and you just articulated it very well. How to implement it is another matter. The question is, how do we now revive? Apparently, there's a national transportation policy by NEDA, but it seems to me that it's lacking in implementation guideline, both on the a coherent one for regional and maybe local implementation. And then I think it should include those mobility support system, like for example, traffic lights, signages, you know, walkways. How do we make it quality for the ridership, right? I mean, where you have covered walkways crossing across the middle lane. Now, it seems to me that it's really a Rex suggestion of bringing together the good heads together, especially you guys have the information, to articulate and push the government to a plan. I mean, we can discuss, we need some quick fixes because the ridership is already increasing, right? The ridership is increasing. We have to fix something right now. By the way, I think we have to give credit to the bus lane. No matter how imperfect it is right now, as Robbie said, it eliminated a couple of things, right? You have now consortia of buses. You now have did the lanes, right? It looks like it's a good starting point. But I think we really need a master plan, and it should be implemented across multiple years of implementation. This is not going to be overnight. So kailangan hindi mapopoliticize, no? So back to the question, Rene, how do we have, what do you recommend is the body? How do we do
That
it?
is a correct question because I told the World Bank in Cebu in 2014 that the number one problem on their BRT solution is institutional. I mentioned that to Babe Singson and he brought it to the cabinet, and up to now they haven't resolved the institutional problem.
Robbie,
And
let's go
I
to
have a
the
solution to that. You have to create a local transit authority, which I proposed in Davao.
Yes.
Because they were pushing the ADB public transport modernization, which requires actually service contracting. And I said, if you're going to get this that way, you might as well build the Davao City Traffic and Transport Authority. And they said, no, we don't need it.
Rene, have you written a paper on that, on the need for a transit authority? Because, you know, we have seen that all over the world. New York has its transit authority.
You know,
So many other cities have that.
all the example cities that Robbie mentioned about practicing service contracting are local transit authorities doing the
Yeah.
contracting, not a national agency. And these agencies have prior experience on managing transit. So it's just a question of going to the private for the supply of the vehicles. They have the capability and the capacity at the outset on how to manage transit.
It's
Zero
noted,
right
Rene.
now in the national government or in the local government.
Yeah, Rene, that's noted. No, let us go back to the what George said. No, about a plan, a master plan. I remember, Robbie, in your presentation, you mentioned that there was an extensive study that was conducted for EDSA and the adjoining roads. And you mentioned that it was quite an expensive study. You know, in our country, whenever we have a problem and whenever there's a suggestion that a project study be conducted, it is met with a lot of dismay because we know for a fact that many studies upon studies upon studies have been conducted, and it is in the implementation where it is lacking. Now, I don't know whether it will be politically acceptable if we are going to push for another study and for a plan to be prepared when in fact you mentioned that there is already a plan and a study that was conducted. So will you please expound on that, Robbie?
Yeah, well, I wanted to say first that Rene and I think we agree on many more things than we disagree on. And I just wanted to give my 100% support about, local public transport agencies. It's we need to build that in, and policies and institutions are just as important as the physical infrastructure. And on your point, Eddie, I uh, I believe we have some very good plans and ideas already there on how to improve EDSA BRT, the EDSA busway. We are spending close to 400 billion on the Metro Manila subway, which will move maybe 300,000 to 400,000 passengers at the start. If we can make commuting, more comfortable, more efficient for 1 to 2 million passengers, let us spend, as Rene suggests, let's spend, 38 billion and make good infrastructure that will resolve many of the technical issues that he has presented. We need both efficient bus and efficient rail working together, and that will give us a more livable city. And I think that's what we all want. Thank you.
On that point, we'll go to Bong, Dr. Bong Montes. You heard the figure 30, is it 35 or 38 billion pesos? And also
38,
you heard
yes.
38 billion. And you also heard from Rene that a transit authority is needed. So how does that jive with a PPP setup?
38 billion is the whole system, both the rolling stock and the infrastructure. No? Is that what the 38 refers to, Robbie? Or Rene?
Actually, it refers mainly to the infrastructure. The rolling stock, the idea was
Separate,
that we could find, yes, once you have a service contract going, then private financing institutions can come forward to finance the rolling stock.
Yeah, because okay, if it's 38 billion, you have a build operate contract, PPP, 38 billion. It's a question of course, the balance sheet of the proponent and how much he can leverage that. But you have a construction period of, let's say, 3 or 5 years. And then from that time forward, he will collect toll revenues, leases of the busways to amortize down the 38 billion with an improved, system with faster speeds and shorter wait times. So you increase the volume of the passengers, the longer platforms that you're looking for. That's a very possible PPP approach. If you are willing to allow the bus tollway to become the busway to become an intercity tollway.
Bong, how does the transit authority come into the picture? Are there a PPP
Well, okay, the question is, well, the transit authority will have a broader mandate for whole Metro Manila, I think. The question is, I say same question as Rene. Who owns EDSA? No? Who runs EDSA? So if you have a PPP, you need a counterpart government agency there. Will be the counterpart of the PPP owner.
That is why I mentioned the transit authority. Once you put it in the bill, how the allocation of responsibility of the road happens, then you will solve that. But
okay, so in that case, you give the transit authority full authority to negotiate on behalf of the government.
Yes,
this concession agreement.
The government, in effect, making the allocation on the road.
Yeah. Okay, I mean, in that case, they will be the counterpart. They will be the implementing agency of the tollway busway.
They can contract to any
Yeah,
private authority for the services.
yeah.
There's a message from MMDA. Let me read it. Our pre-pandemic average travel time for buses. Let me see. Where did it go? Our pre-pandemic travel time for buses. Do you have that?
Eddie, just a quick reaction to Dr. Bong's point.
Go ahead while I look for the message.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, you know, we are now spending like about 1 trillion a year on infrastructure. And for the longest time, road-based public transport was viewed as something which should pay for itself, you know, that somehow revenues from the commuters should pay for the service in its entirety. And I think we need to think today of a way of funding public transport where we recognize that public transport is an essential service, just like health, just like education, and is deserving of government support. And sometimes, you know, subsidy is considered like with some negative views, right? And people are always worried about having some continuing obligation for a subsidy. But I think we all know that public transport, if it's efficient and high quality, delivers so many benefits for the entire society. And even, you know, we've heard so often that, you know, the economy is losing so many billions per day because of very poor public transport and congestion. So I would say, let us not be shy of investing in good public transport infrastructure, especially for road-based public transport, which moves today more than 90% of all the Filipinos using public transport nationwide. So that's, I think, you know, my sort of thought there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, Robbie, you can, if the capacity of the private sector to mobilize funds for a project, that's you can have a viability gap financing, where it's a very transparent way for the government to support, to be able to have affordability, bankability, and commercial viability. But for example, if you remember the MNTC, at some point when they started charging 100 pesos per truck, people did not like to pay initially. But after a while, they realized the efficiency, the gains of being able to travel MNTC faster. They're willing to pay. Even, let's say, Slex. Before Slex, you only had to pay 1 peso, 25 pesos, plus 25 centavos. Of course, they didn't have any money to keep it, to maintain it, to realign it, etc. Now people are paying like 15,000 a month to go through Slex with the e-pass and all that. But they're maintaining it properly. It's gainfully paid for. So again, the principle of user pays. But if it goes beyond affordability, then that's when the subsidy can come in a very transparent way. The lump sum amount that you provide upfront, to make it both affordable, viable, and bankable. It's a matter of running the numbers. How much can you collect in terms of toll revenues of the buses that pass through the tollway, the busway? And then you have to figure out how to amortize, how many years you have to amortize that. And even also how much toll will you collect for the bus, for every trip through the busway? It's a matter of running the numbers. And if you need to have a subsidy, yes, it's as opposed to spending the subsidy on something else, like along Pasig or whatever.
Okay, let me read this message from MMDA. It says that our pre-pandemic average travel time from Monumento to Rojas Boulevard was an average of 2 hours and 31 minutes. Come the pandemic, travel time for the same route with the bus carousel, travel time was reduced to 1 hour, 8 minutes. So there is a significant reduction in travel time. Okay, now for cars, the average travel time pre-pandemic for the same route was 2 hours, 5 minutes. Now, it is only an average of 1 hour and 11 minutes. So that means there's a 50% reduction in travel time for both buses and cars.
And you should quantify that. In other words, that saving in time, how much of people are willing to pay
Yes.
for the better service and the faster turnaround time. And that can be used to amortize the construction of the busway, all of the platforms that Robbie is looking for, precisely to increase the volume, of course, up to the maximum limit that RENE calculates it should be. Those are economic values that have been created. You should be able to extract that surplus, employ it back to infrastructure.
Yes, understood. So now, okay, we're out of time. I see June Palafox has been posting a lot of messages, and I know that June is an exponent of 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 allocation of road space. If June is still there, would you like to expound? Can we give you the floor, June, on this concept of 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 road allocation? And the question is, how can we achieve that? Because I think somebody raised the point that on EDSA, who is in charge, no, and who will allocate the road space, who will be the arbiter, who will be the King Solomon to allocate this road space in accordance with your formula. June, are you still there? I guess he signed out. Now, anyway, I think we have run out of time. It was a very interesting discussion. I would like to thank all of you for joining us and sharing your insights. Now, I can see that the RENE, Engineer RENE and Robbie, for instance, are both united in with the objective of increasing the capacity and the throughput for passengers. But they differ in the sense that in the case of RENE, he believes that train will cannibalize the bus, or vice versa, or the bus will cannibalize the train passengers, no? While in the case of Robbie, you believe that both can coexist, that bus will complement the train, okay? Well, actually, that is the strategy taken by the OTR. And we have seen the benefits of that strategy when MRT was short of capacity. DOTR through LTFRB introduced this bus augmentation service, okay, in order to absorb the unserved capacity of MRT through the buses. Now, there is a symbiotic relationship between the two. And as pointed out by Robbie, we are seeing this in so many large cities. In Hong Kong, for instance, we're familiar with Hong Kong because we go there very often. No? In the island of Hong Kong alone, there is a subway system underneath. There is a rail tram on the surface, And there are also buses. So there is a redundancy of transport systems in Hong Kong, given a very populous city. In the same manner, we see this also in other large cities. So it seems that there is room for both to coexist. Now, Bong, you made the point that PPP as a development mode is feasible for this busway system development, no? And that it requires all the major components to be brought into the picture, no, for that. So here we are, as we said, that we are in this webinar in order to explore for solutions as to how to go forward. Now, I'm glad to inform you that we have legislators among the audience. I saw Congressman Sarmiento, who is the House Committee Chair on Transportation. We have likewise invited the Office of Senator Grace Poe, who is the chair of the Senate Committee on Public Services. Now, I would like to mention that when I presented the holistic plan last August 26, 2015, Senator Poe sent 3 of her staff members to observe the meeting. And she is keeping close tabs with developments on public transportation. At the same time, we have a lot of thought leaders with us in the audience, plus government officials. We have observers as well from MMDA. So I hope that the discussion was able to generate enough information, ideas, and outputs for their consideration. Now, again, I would like to thank you. May I request for a group photo? George, can we have your profile close up, please? Okay, Arnold, can you take our picture?
Mr. Rex is not here. Mr. Rex, can you please join?
Rex left already. He left.
Yeah, he left
So
now.
give your best smile.
Okay.
Rene,
Joanna,
smile, Rene. You made a good presentation. You
Okay,
made some
1,
very
2,
good points. So
3. One last chat, Joanna, please. 1, 2, 3. Thanks.
thank you. Thank you. So this concludes our webinar, and we hope to see you again sometime soon. Just a reminder, we have another event later tonight at 7 o'clock. It is a reprise of a concert. Bong, I know that you love music and classical music, no? So at 7 o'clock, we have a reprise of movies in concert with orchestra. The performers are the Manila Symphony Orchestra, coloratura soprano Stephanie Quintin, tenor Nomer Vidal, and then we also have violinist Christian Tan, plus champion tangeros and tangera, Jang and Jeng Lopez. So hope to see you there. Again,
Time is that,
thank you
Ted.
so much on behalf of the Management Association of the Philippines. Good
Thank you all.
afternoon.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good
Bye. Stay
afternoon.
safe. Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.